How long are we gonna stay out?
The people now have the power, and they're using it.
The United Campus Workers of Georgia are here fighting for fair wages, fair raises, and for fair funding.
Strikeover, let's go.
Communication Workers of America. United Campus Workers of Georgia, 3265, bitch. Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Workers ship the boxes, they swiffer and they mop and look chipper whenever talking and whipping the shopping carts. They pack the beer in the walk-ins and stack the weird little boxes. Keep our kitchen fridges stocked and our financial markets solvent. They clocking for a $50 bucks and bear the coffin of like 60 thrifty chuds and get spit on like sitting ducks. And they are sick of getting fucked. So you ever wanted to honor them? Here's my ask for all my hominids. Collective bargaining, Amazon and Target and FedEx and Walmart and Instacart and Whole Foods till we all get what we ought to get. Workers run the company. There isn't any argument. So are you with them? Are you in? El Pueblo, Unido, jamás será vencido. El Pueblo, Unido, jamás será vencido. El Pueblo, Unido, jamás será vencido. Jamás será vencido. Jamás será vencido. Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Imagine a minute, millions of average women and men in the tragic position of trading in passion for wages and cash till they shackled by capitalism. Imagine a minute, millions of average citizens planting the spinach and waxing the kitchens and stacking the linens, contractors and renters and tenants and labor extracted for pittance. What if they coordinated to address the sort of state of it in an organization? Guess fucking what? That's what organized labor does. And not even sort of, it's more of the crux. Taking the power from hoarders of bucks, big bankers offshore and they cuts, returning the value of labor to those who created the billionaires owe it to us. So if you're jaded and silly about waking up early to earn them back, if you sad about burning, if you got a curious yearning and had it with passively lurking, we got your back and we happy to have you out on the picket line actively working. Going, which side are you on? El Pueblo, Unido, jamás será vencido. 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 Which side are you on?
Hello, everyone. Welcome in. It is past time for us to get started. It is late. It is late. I was supposed to be online an hour and 15 minutes ago, and I completely lost track of time this morning. It's been, I don't know if I've talked about this yet, but this semester has been absolutely wild with the amount of things that I have needed to do for students before the semesters begin. Ordinarily, there's like one or two students that move from one class to another. The process for all of the years that I have been teaching with this institution, the process has been so minimal for me that I haven't even paid much attention to the process at all. But something has changed this semester, and all of a sudden I've been constantly bombarded with student after student after student who wants to enroll in the full class or switch to this other class or do this other thing. And I'm having to juggle forms and send out emails. I was in an email exchange that was like 20 exchanges deep. Took me an hour today to just get a student's form filled out so they could get switched from one class to another. And I'm like, this cannot be the way. This is not it. I want to be more upset about whatever change has happened, but I keep failing to show up to the regular meetings and the department meetings and the faculty senate meetings and all of the other meetings that I'm supposed to be attending so that I know about institutional changes, what they are and why they're happening. It's really largely my fault for not having been able to attend any of the recent meetings that have been going on, because I've either been out of town or traveling, or I've had conflicts, or typically my faculty meetings are at 5 o'clock in the morning for me because they're on the East Coast, and they're up and ready to go by 7 o'clock their time. It's 5 a.m. here. I'm still asleep for another hour. So, but anyway, fortunately last live, it cut right out at the part of my article, the patriarchal dialectic, so I didn't get to see your reactions, hear your views on the rest of the article. Yeah, that's what I figured happened. I haven't had time to go back and look at the VOD to see how much of the VOD is there, or what's saved, or what you all can see of me as I'm losing connection. But as I was wrapping up the last stream, that's what I said, is that I'm going to pick up rather than me trying to trudge through and nobody being able to see the content because my internet connection is so bad. I just ended the stream with the plan to pick it up and finish going over your article today, or finish going over it in the next stream, which is today, which I almost forgot to stream entirely today. So, well, you would think so, Matt, right? You would think that those meetings could be an email. You would think that if it was important information, it would be gone over in the meeting, and then in addition, there would be an email sent out, right? That at least, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So So anyway, that's going to be the plan for today. We're going to finish up the Earth is a who. We're going to talk a little bit more about the dialectics, get more into it, and in a lot of ways pick up the conversation where we left off last time. Though in last stream, the overarching focus was really kind of directed at morality and ethics and what we're supposed to do about the things, the dialectics that we're talking about. And I think that for this stream, I would like to focus a little bit more on the establishment of truth as a function of biopower. No, I want to talk about the formation of ideologies that come to take on biopower as informed by as informed by this. So right, that's true. If it was an email, nobody would have come to the meeting in the first place. Well, that's my institution has so many other things that are worthwhile. I don't know how to phrase this, but it seems like something's wrong. It seems like it seems like something is going on and something is wrong in the institution. Not wrong, that's not the right way to say it, but there has been a change. There has been a change, and that change has been I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's jobs are frustrating. That's working jobs are frustrating in general, but that's okay. It's not just your internet. It was really, and I don't have a good explanation for why my internet connection was quite so bad. Sometimes if there's a little bit of rain, it gets a little bit windy. I'm on satellite, so the satellite dish moves around, but it wasn't really that bad. It wasn't that big of a deal. I have no idea why all of a sudden I went from great internet connection to absolutely none. And again, I still haven't had a chance to, literally, since last stream, I've been just doing schoolwork. This is kind of the beginning of the semester for me still. I've got one class that just started, another class that is in the part of for their semester where they're working on their application essays. So I'm grading thesis statements and sometimes whole rough drafts. And one of my other courses is in the part where they are just thinking about thinking about their project. So they are submitting their project proposals, and I have to respond to all of them in a timely manner. Right, next week I'll have less than half the work than I have going on this week, on top of all of the other extra institutional stuff that, again, in previous semesters, I haven't had to do all of this work and chase down all of these emails and follow up with all of these students and all of these other departments and make sure that all of this stuff is getting filed. I usually don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But it has been an exceptionally busy semester in all regards, so this week has been a thing. But I got caught up with most of the stuff. That's what I was working on. That's what I was trying to say, is that I haven't had a chance to even look at the past VOD or really think about any of the stuff that we've talked about since our last stream. I've just been schoolwork. Um, but that's what I signed up for. Next semester will actually be kind of a little bit worse. The first few weeks, I should be signed up for a full 4 semesters. This semester I had 3 classes for the one university, and then another class for the other university. Next semester I'm going to have 4, 4 and 1. But sometimes it's spaced out differently, so it works out a little bit more easily for me. So sometimes I'll end up teaching 3 16-week courses. And that seems like it would be a lot. And it's true that that's a bunch of stuff that happens all at one time. But with the 16-week courses, everything that we do is taken in bite-sized chunks. So what they have to do is really minimal, and then what I have to do in response to them is usually very minimal, week to week to week. We're just touching base, we're saying a few things, right, there's 16 weeks is a long time. And then when you take that and turn it into 12 weeks, or 8 weeks, or 5 weeks, then those semesters can be a little bit more stressful. So sometimes I'll have a 16-week, and then 2 8 weeks, and then another 8 week at the end of the semester. So that first 8 weeks, I just have so much to do. It depends on how it's how they break it up for me, and I don't really get any say in that. It really depends on what students sign up for. Actually is how my institution does it. The way that it works is the first classes that fill up, that are in-person classes, go to a specific group of people, right? And as those things fill up, name by name by name, those courses are filled up. And then there's a group of people that teach only online, and for those classes, as those classes fill up, the people who are above me, right, there are 2 other instructors who have seniority over me. They've been at the institution longer. So as the courses fill up, they get their first the first class. Somebody gets the first class, another person gets the second class, and I get the third class. And then as those fill up, then, I'm always the third. I get every third class that fills up, and it just depends on what students sign up for and when those classes are full as to what class I'm going to get, which is kind of neat. Like it's fair, right? It's designed by a system, right? Or it's selected by a system. I don't know. Anyways, I'm just rambling. It's great to see you all. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Let's get into some stuff. Let's start talking about philosophy. Oh, wait a minute. I might want to do let's do this first. So, I want to make this brief. Because I don't want to spend any more breath on Charlie Kirk. Pretty much, period. I have a few more sentences to say right now about this. But after that, it's old news. It's yesterday's garbage. Charlie Kirk is yesterday's garbage. I don't want to disparage too much people who are still maintaining some kind of conversation about this. But I think that this serves as a pretty good indicator for determining who is concerned with looking at material conditions to see what we can do about getting a revolution going, and people who are concerned about chasing clout and about being a part of not the solution. And at this point, anyone who is still talking about Charlie Kirk, even if what you are doing on your channel or with your YouTube or with whatever, even if what you are doing is talking bringing truth to Charlie Kirk's message, right? Even if what you're doing is talking about his vile message and how vile that message is, you are still taking part of the perpetuation of that message. You are platforming the ideas of a dead fascist who we should all just let die. And we should be done with this. Right. And I don't think that my take is severe or too serious or I think that anyone on the left who is still a part of that narrative is a part of the problem, right? And I'm not saying that it's their fault and we should identify them as bad people or kick them out of our leftist clubs. What I'm trying to say is that if you are seeing other content creators who are still carrying on and carrying on and carrying on, especially if they are watching Charlie Kirk's videos, if you're watching the videos, even if you're doing so to talk trash about them, you are still platforming the ideas of a dead fascist. Stop doing that. Stop. Let the dead fascist fucking die. Please. Yes, no one should debate fascists or fascism. And certainly shouldn't be debating a dead fascist who doesn't care about your ideas, right? So if you see other people that are doing this, just bring it to their attention. Hey, in case it hasn't occurred to you. It's been a week now, and here you are still platforming the ideas of a dead fascist. Stop doing that, right? Just let's begin that conversation so that people on the left can let it go and that we can move on to addressing material conditions. Now, with that being said, now that I have said all of that, let me engage in one more thing, because it's kind of funny. It's very true. It's a very good point, and it helps promote a good friend of mine who I don't get to talk about often enough, or don't take the time to talk about often enough. So I want to platform my friend, MitNerd. For those of you who are not familiar with MitNerd, I'm gonna do a shout out. 63 is it? I should have looked this up first. Here, let me do this. Let me do this first. Yeah, 36. MitNerd 36. I want to be able to shout out the nerd as we're going. App. There we go. So that I can get MitNerd's thing. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with MitNerd, they are a leftist bard. what they go by. They are a professional musician and they are extremely talented. I had the opportunity to live with them for a short while we were living in the yurt out there in the middle of nowhere. Mitnerd came out to live with us to help us out, give us an extra pair of hands, and it was just an amazing experience to have a minstrel who is just ready at the drop of a hat to pull out the ukulele and start singing songs about organizing and revolution and fuck the police. So, and their repertoire is really quite extensive. The songs that they know that are famous songs, like Which Side Are You On, is one that we were listening to before stream started today, as covered by Lingua Francois. And this is one of my favorite versions of Which Side Are You On, but Mitnerd also does a great job of it. And this is a song that Mitnerd wrote in response to, I think, directly to Charlie Kirk. So this is not me promoting Charlie Kirk. This is me promoting my friend Mitnerd, who is a fantastic streamer. So if you get the chance to check them out on Twitch, what they do is they just sit in front of their camera and they play live music, and you can put stuff in chat and Mitnerd will incorporate the things that you're including into their songs. It's really quite an amazing show to watch. So oh good, I can't wait to read all that, Kiyomatara. But let me play this from Mitnerd. We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll move on with the content we want to talk about today. I think that's that I wanted. Yeah, I think that's going to be a better view.
So when a fascist dies, it's good, you see. Yes, it's sad when they leave behind a family, but the dignity was something they gave up when they use eugenics to fill their cup. So think of needs and wants that they now can't take. Think of the fields of bodies they now can't make. Think of the peace of mind for the marginalized in your neighborhood. 'Cause when a fascist dies, it's sad, but it's good.
And it's gonna replay again.
So when a fascist dies, it's good, you see. Yes, it's sad when they leave behind a family, but the dignity was something they gave up when they use eugenics to fill their cup. So think of needs and wants that they now can't take. Think of the fields of bodies they now can't make. Think of the peace of mind for the marginalized in your neighborhood. 'Cause when a fascist dies, it's sad, but it's good.
So that's the last thing that I want to do and say with regard to the passing of the recent fascist that nobody should care about anymore. Right? At this point, we can play the song and move on. Right? Hopefully everybody else gets the message and follows suit, and then we can just move on. As a culture and society, we can just move on. Right, and I think that's a better. I think that's the right take. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. So, let's see what Kiyomatara put in chat. Eventually, I'm going to write an article arguing the atheist and Christian kinds of believe the same thing. They just treat their metaphysical as something physical. Atheists say there is nothing before you are born and nothing after you die. Yet they're treating that nothingness like a physical thing. But it's by its very nature, nothing cannot be physical, right? Atheists say there's nothing. Yeah, I'm apathetic to fascist dying. Yeah, same Jane. Absolutely feel the same way about that, Jane. There you say there's nothing before you are born and nothing after you die. As something tangibly meaningful. Huh, okay. Conversely, the Christian calls God the Alpha and Omega, and yet they make God a physical thing, something that exists, limited to a specific doctrine. That's true. They also treat the metaphysical as physical. Now, what if they were both right? This is theory. But I haven't been practicing it. Now, Maori. This is the Maori belief in Te Keori. Since Te Keori, the nothingness is before you and are born. And after you die, it makes it the Alpha and the Omega. And doesn't get trapped in the contradiction of atheism's physicality and theism's limited doctrine. There's a whole lot of dense stuff going on there. That is a valuable and important systemic similarity between those worldviews. It is the same process / function. It's the same mindset or mode of navigating the world, just employed in wildly different ways. Yeah, I'm gonna mull that over too. Right, that's I'm really just taking a moment to really let that sink in and think about the relationships individually and then how they relate to each other. Quite a lot going on there. I read Adorno and I was like, holy crap, this fits Kaori so well. Yeah, that's I'm also like trying to wrap my head around the Adorno vibes. That are clearly there. Oh, I don't have my hold on. I don't have all my things open. And I haven't made my announcement in Discord. Dag nabbit. Hold on, give me a moment to get caught up. That's what happens when you just jump into stream real fast without being properly prepared. Make that go away for now. Move this here so I can thing. What was the other thing? What was the other thing? Okay. No. Okay, that's already in the right. Yeah. Okay. We're not dealing with that. Okay, cool. Okay. I think I'm ready. So let's actually go ahead and get ready to hop on over to this. One of these days I'm gonna get organized. I just still keep thinking about it. That I've also never really thought about the fact that atheism does take that process of DJ Che, welcome in. Thank you for the raid. It's so good to see you. I hope that you are doing well. I hope that you had a good stream. Good to see you. Thank you for bringing your raid over here. Okay. Good. Kiyomatara had put some deep philosophical ideas in chat, and so I'm just sitting here kind of just processing a little bit. Yet they treat that nothing like a physical thing. The nothing is more than a physical thing. It becomes a form of biopower in itself. It becomes impetus. Right? And that makes sense. When I say it becomes impetus, the nothingness itself is reformalized into a thing, which the thing is part of the ethos of what moves, what compels, what informs how they understand and navigate the world. Huh. The thing is, also Kiyomatara, is that for me, there's an additional cascade of meaning that I'm trying to understand, that this is a regular phenomenon where absence or lack or a vacuum itself becomes a thing which has the same kind of nature and character. The paradox of nothingness is a mind-boggling idea. It's one of my favorite things. So, when I first became a philosopher, it was common. What would happen to me regularly is, somebody would say, "What is it you do?" Well, I teach philosophy, or I study philosophy, and people expect you to be able to do philosophy on the spot. Okay, well, say something philosophical, right? And really, that's not how philosophy works, right? If philosophy is more like a mirror, If you don't put something in front of the mirror, you get nothing. Well, that's not necessarily, the mirror is not a good analogy, but for you to get something from philosophy, you have to give it something. You have to give something to philosophy. You can't just go to philosophy and say, okay, be philosophy, right? You have to bring something to it for philosophy to give you something back. Anyway, but what I started to practice having these icebreakers, basically, that are deep philosophical concepts that you could bring up in a party setting. You know, you've got a whole bunch of college kids who are all standing around a keg. You can only expect the intellectual content of the conversation to go so high, right? There is a topping out of the intellectual capacity of that. Sometimes those conversations go until 4 o'clock in the morning, but still, right? There's those kinds of situations, or in other kinds of social settings where somebody's like, well, say something philosophical to me. Usually nothingness is my go-to. Right? I'll ask, well, okay, does nothing exist? That's a great way to start that conversation. Does nothing exist? Yes, to put it more accurately, philosophy is a filter for helping you understand something that you already understand. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And when somebody responds, does nothing exist, often they want to say, well, no, it doesn't exist. And I say, well, how do you know what I'm talking about then when I say nothing? If it isn't a thing which exists, how do you know what it is that I'm talking about when I say, does nothing exist? How can you answer the question about it if it doesn't exist, right? And then we get into the from there it can go a number of ways, right? From there, it's up to them to decide which direction the conversation goes. Are we going to talk about the difference between things that exist in the world and the things which exist only in thought or in theory? Or and the gray areas between that, like democracies. One of my favorite examples. You can't go to anywhere in the world and point to democracy. But we all know that democracy literally does exist. It is an existent thing which exists in the world, and we can talk about it meaningfully, right? Democracy is as real as unicorns. Or unicorns are as real as democracy. Take your pick. It goes both ways. And that for a lot of people, that difference is hard to reconcile. That democracy and unicorns are not really that far apart in their metaphysical being, in the nature of what it is that they are, and how we think about and use those concepts to navigate everyday life. There's not that big of a difference between democracy and unicorns. But it's also more than just an empty set, too. Because that's one of the best responses that I've had about, well, what is nothing? If nothing is something, but it doesn't exist anywhere, but it is something, what is it? And a good response was, nothing is an empty set. And I think that's mathematically a pretty good way to describe what nothing is, but also falls short of meeting the same kinds of ineffable quality. Right, there has never been a movie whose plot has centered around never-ending story is a story centered around nothing. Right? And that's a never-ending story is such a magnificent movie in that element of creativity. Right? What is the movie about? The movie, actually, the whole movie of Never-Ending Story is about nothing. Very explicitly. Right, it's a neat concept to grapple with. America is just point to America. Right. But that's and this complicates things, actually. I love it when you are trying to make a joke, but you also help me move along in a philosophical conversation to really add depth to that conversation. My chat is really good about helping me out that way. But this speaks to the postmodern problem. While this is a joke, there are lots of Americans who literally believe that they live in a democracy, which means that the truth that those people have for what democracy is not the truth that the rest of us are using for what democracy is and is supposed to mean. That doesn't mean that these people are just wrong. That's not the way that truth/power/knowledge works. Truth/power/knowledge works such that it literally has material consequences in a person's life, in how that person lives their life. So the distorted misunderstanding of what democracy is supposed to be, that those incorrect Americans who don't understand politics, who don't understand how governments work, those people's viewpoints interfere with the rest of us having meaningful conversations about those kinds of things. This is the kind of problem that we run into, like we were talking about with communism. If you would like to critique communism, that's fine. But first we have to figure out what it is that you're critiquing. Marxism or communist theory, which isn't necessarily the same as Marxism. Or governments that have called themselves communist or Marxist, none of which necessarily the same as the political theory or Marx's original thoughts on the theory, right? We've got lots of nuance to make there before we can begin having a conversation about the conversation. We have to get all of the meta conversation out of the way first, right? And what I've come to find is that all of the terms and language that we might use they're all what's the word? They've all been retarded in a kind of way, in that their effectiveness, their okay, let me make the point and then maybe work my way back. It is the case, I believe, that what we are talking about are the tools of the oppressor. Okay, that the tools of the oppressor cannot be used to dismantle the master's house, right? And the language that revolutionaries keep coming up with and using to describe states of affairs that require our attention, our action. That the terms, the language, all of those things are immediately become subsumed colonial machine, who takes those things up and redefines them in ways that make them ineffective, that make them not useful tools for dismantling the master's house. And people just do this, right? And it's such the way that I framed it makes it sound like there's a nefarious plot by the government or by the state, and I think that sure CIA probably does some of this, does do this on purpose, but a lot of it just has to do with people being people, and there's lots of social layers. There's lots of social recreation here that cannot be put of the state trying to do direct interference to prevent us from being able to do revolutionary stuff. This is real. This is going on. But the problem is much larger, right? This is real and going on, but we're talking about a monster that is way bigger than just those institutions, those to hang on to their state power. Those kinds of things end up becoming ripples and shock waves that create more ripples and shock waves, and become exponential in their degradation of our ability to make those tools useful, I think is what I'm trying to get to. In my most recent article here, I argue that many communist parties abandon the antithesis in dialectics that led to their collapse. Is that the one that you just posted a few days ago? Because I got an email that you would come out, you would posted a new one. The people are often the implementer of what the state wants. Yes, absolutely, Jane. And it's one of the wild things, about manufactured consent that is really hard to come to terms with. That we want an easy bad guy that we can point the finger to, and that we can blame the problems on this bad guy. This person is nefarious, or this state is nefarious, and they have nefarious ends, and they are doing evil things, and so we want to point to them and say that's who the bad guy is. But we don't get anything so complicated, or we don't get anything so simple in the real world. Our problems are the product of regular, honest people who are just trying to go about living their lives in the best way that they know how, right? And it's hard to make a villain of people who are just trying to pay their rent and pay their bills and have kids and live the American dream, or whatever kind of dream it is that they want to have. Those people going about their everyday business are recreating the horrible evils that is society. Right? But it's hard to blame those individuals who didn't choose to be in the situation that they're in the first place, right? None of these laborers wanted for their bodies to be necessary for fueling the fascist machine. But here we are, right? That is the reality. And if those people don't go to work their jobs to keep the fascist machine rolling, then hospitals close and people don't get their medications and people don't get fed. Right? There are catastrophic consequences for the most marginalized and the most needy of our society, for us trying to rattle the cage and to shake the system up and to displace or to disrupt the system and the fascist machine. In our efforts to disrupt the fascist machine, we threaten the lives of the most vulnerable of us. And that's something that people on the left find to be unconscionable, right? So we are caught in this paradoxical trap where the right thing to do is for us to grind the most vulnerable and helpless of us up, right? To do the work of the fascists for them, right? That's where we are. Nova Rider, it's good to see you. It's been a while. Yeah, I have missed you as well. It's great to see you. I'm glad you're here. Boogeymen are ubiquitous in oppressive processes. Yes, and necessary. There has to be a boogeyman. Argonian bum. I was looking for an opportunity. I've been looking for an opportunity to bring them up and to shout them up. I really like checking out their streams. Argonian bum was talking about this in their stream yesterday, actually, that fascism requires constant fueling. You cannot let that fire go out. You have to play on people's fears, and you have to stoke those fears continuously. You have to, with the bellows, you have to constantly, without break, keep that fire going. Because if you let that rage, that fear-driven rage die down, it gives people the opportunity to reflect. It gives people the opportunity to be critical of the ways in which they are being manipulated. You have to keep that fire going at full throttle, full tilt, 100% of the time. There always has to be a new bad guy, a new enemy, a new them, a new other to otherize. There has to be. Otherwise, fascism can't maintain power. It depends on people's fears and their mistrust. What day are you guys talking about? What day are you guys talking about? I'm not sure what day. How is life in the new Nazi Germany? Here in the United States, it's awful. Things are awful here, and getting worse every day, pretty much. But we're doing what we can to talk about some of these problems and to figure out where to go from here. Today we are talking about an article that Kiyomatara posted previously. We are probably going to talk about disposability as counter-revolution too. This is the recent one that they just posted. Let me get my correct here. That's not the right. And this is the one that we were talking about. There we go. Last stream, so on Friday's stream, we were, I read through this article and I got right to the end. Well, that's not the end. I got right to the end about here. And then I lost internet. My internet connection went bad. So like we're right at the end of the article. So we're going to finish up talking about this article and talking about how this metaphysics talking about this metaphysics. I don't want to engage in the project by just comparison, which is what I was trying to do. Where I was trying to go was to compare and contrast this metaphysics with other kinds of metaphysicses. But the more I was trying to do that in on Friday's stream, the more I believe that I was limiting the philosophy itself. So I'm trying to avoid comparison as much as possible, and just trying to take this philosophy for this philosophy's sake. Hold on. I'll allow that. Typically gendered language is going to not come through Nova Writer. So there's a few words, and this is a good example of gendered language that generally I tend to try to discourage. Disparaging language that is also gendered. But I get you're not trying to be sexist with the use of this, though there is still some implications there. But not a big deal. We'll just let it go. Anyone who makes you write things you don't intend to. Yeah, Nintendo. Funny. That's hilarious. Okay, so yeah, so that's what we're doing today. We're going to finish up this article. I wanted to copy and paste this into chat, and I should put it over here too on YouTube, so that we can put that over there on YouTube. Anyone, if you'd like to, please click the link and follow along with the article. Kiyamatara would also probably not mind having more subscribers to their Substack, so feel free to subscribe. I'm a woman who doesn't mind usage of bitch. Good. And that's a lot of people don't mind it. And we'll have a quick aside about it. There is some weight to claims made about negative associations, even if they're not directly direct association. So, and I'd mentioned this on a previous stream, Negative Nancy. That's something that I'm still trying to omit from my repertoire, right? The kinds of things that I'm in the habit of saying. Being a Negative Nancy is unnecessarily gendered. Right? There's no reason for us to make the association with somebody who is being, shall we say, hopelessly negative, and any kind of gendered being. Right? There's no reason for us to make that association, and there is, I believe, some power to those kinds of association, even if we don't mean them to have negative or disparaging connotations. Also, we don't know how other people will interpret. So even if we didn't mean to say something in a gendered or demeaning or misogynist way, we don't know how other people are going to take it. So erring on the side of caution, I generally recommend against that kind of use of language. And I don't make a big deal about it. I allowed the comment. In a lot of cases where it's popped up, I've allowed the comment and just not even said anything about it at all. Um, but I think that there's some value to just drawing a little bit of attention to it and talking about it for a minute. But it's also one of those things that's up here, right? In the by up here, I mean, what I usually stress is the material conditions and the moral relationships that we have to each other, which is our near immediate connections to the actual objective world. The other things that are up here, these social constructs, don't really matter as much. But even though they don't really matter to me, they matter in that they still have effective biopower, they still change people's mind, they still influence how people feel about themselves or about their particular role in society or what have you. So are you afraid Trump is gonna censor Twitch and other social media platforms? Not at all. I am not afraid of the idea that Trump is going to censor on Twitch. I'm waiting for any reason to just leave Twitch. Right? And that's like I'm at a point now where at the slightest increase in inconvenience for being on Twitch, I'll just stop streaming on the platform. I'll go to some other platform and use that as my primary platform. I don't need to be here. So I'm not worried about that in particular. I do think that there is reason, Nova Writer, for us in general, besides my personal interest, I think that there is reason for us to be concerned about the potential loss of yet another tool or platform that we have been using to spread information and to organize. So there is some concern about that. Yes, Kick is probably exactly what I would go to. It's one that I've been meaning to check out, but I haven't because I just haven't had the time. And part of the reason that I haven't had the time is because I'm busy streaming on Twitch. So if I were to get banned, for example, if I were to log in one day and my account has been suspended, I probably wouldn't even bother to appeal it. At this point, I would just go to Kick, set up an account, and start streaming from there. Right? I'd let you all know on Discord, but I wouldn't be that concerned about the loss of the platform personally. There's also power in reclamation of otherwise pejorative terms. I'm glad that you brought that up, Jane. This is something that that I've actually spent all week talking about in my class's discussion board. And it's something that I think doesn't get enough attention, is the reclamation of language, or the reclamation of other kinds of icons, the reclamation of other kinds of tropes or stereotypes. Rosie the Riveter is one of the ones that comes up that in the classroom is a common. It comes up every semester, actually. And when Rosie the Riveter comes up, usually what I talk about is how, because people will mention that Rosie the Riveter is a feminist icon. And usually I bring to people's attention that that's not what Rosie the Riveter was. Right? Rosie the Riveter was government propaganda to fuel war. Right? That's what Rosie the Riveter was. At her inception, as an icon, that's what she is a mechanism for manipulating women into roles so that governments can maintain their war machine. That's what Rosie the Riveter is, or was, right? was. But the people who were intended to be manipulated by that icon took up that icon and gave that icon whole new meanings, right? They poured themselves into it and embodied that icon with a whole new conception of her own. Which is a power and force that the government couldn't put back in the bottle. There were conversations after the end of the war about what the government was going to do about all of these uppity women who are now working in the workforce, who feel like they have earned a position in the workforce, but all of the men want them to go back home and to go back being homemakers. So there was a wave of propaganda that came out after the war was over to try and get women back into the workplace. And none of it worked. None of it was successful because Rosie the Riveter had become such a powerful, resonating icon with the people who were now not going to give up those workspaces. We're not going to give up those freedoms and those privileges that had been previously only afforded to men, right? One of the creators of Kick is a homophobe and not a nice person. That is very good information to know, Nova Rider. Do you know if they are still involved with the management of Kick, or were they somebody who started Kick and then they left Kick? So they were just the starter. Yeah, okay. That's no worries. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything. It's just, for me, that might matter. If the homophobe is still in power and would be benefiting from me making dollars on Kick. If they are going to be making dollars because I'm making dollars on Kick, then I don't want to be making dollars on Kick. But if that homophobe has left, then I don't care, right? Then I will care less. So I'll just do some research and find that out. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, so I know to dig a little bit into that. Term queer is an example of reclamation, yeah, and it's one that I do use in the classroom from time to time, but generally avoid using often. It's a word that, in the right context, has some very useful shock value that I think is useful for shocking normies in some kinds of situations in the classroom where especially in that usage of queer is usually done by queer people to express some sentiment about themselves as, as them as an individual in a larger community of the queer community. And usually that's how I use it. I don't refer to myself as queer, but I use the word queer in a way that it makes it clear that the group that we are talking about is a group that I'm in, right? This group that we are talking about in the classroom, let's not forget that I am actually in this group, right? But before you continue that sentence, just want to remind you that we're talking about a group that your teacher is in. By all means, continue your sentence now, right? So just something that I think does help emphasize that. Like the stereotype about Sami only farm reindeers, right? There's the culture is rich and diverse and has been around for a very long time. There's lots of stuff about the Sami people, and it's not just about the reindeer, right? That doesn't fit my patriarchal dialectic in the article. The men, by their monopolization of agency, were turned into an object, not only by their dependents, but also by their state, turning them into soldiers. Right. And I really appreciate, Kimatari, that you are really good at that, making that dialectical relationship explicitly clear in a whole bunch of different ways throughout your work. That the process is always going both directions, right? When right, like with the I should just read your article, because you're just going to explain this in the article. In fact, I remember when we were reading the article last week that's kind of what you were talking about. So I'll just turn back to the article in just a minute. Nova Rider, it's funny. You were not here for the beginning of the stream. I started off with a conversation about this, actually. When somebody like that is killed, well, and let's not aggrandize this, right? Charlie Kirk wasn't killed for what he believed. Charlie Kirk was just killed, right? And we still don't know the full motives of the killer. And what I was talking about at the beginning of stream is that there are a lot of people in leftist spaces who are still talking about Charlie Kirk's ideas. And while they are talking about Kirk's ideas, they are platforming those ideas. They are giving them more airspace rather than just letting them die, which is what I want to do. Charlie Kirk is dead, and I don't care about his death. Actually, I don't have anything to say about it other than it's gone and over with, and we all should probably just move on, right? So that we can let those ideas die. We don't need to continue to talk about them. We don't even need to continue to talk about why they're bad. They are, and we can just move on. We don't need to give them further any further platform. Good. So I don't remember precisely where we were I don't remember because I haven't gone back to watch the VOD to see where it was that we were cut off. So let me start because I think this is the breadwinners thing. So this is right, going back to your last comment here in chat, Kimatara, where you're talking about your patriarchal dialectic. That's where we left off. Well, not quite where we were a little bit further than that. No, that is where we left off, right? Trying to think if there was right. Do I want to go back and redo this? No. Well, this brings into context maybe it would be a good idea to back up a little bit. To put things in context. Okay, so the Karanga can recognize that a river, a mountain, a rock may be an ancestor. This is why within Karanga, you often can witness wailing or weeping, even if it's Karanga in relation to land. It is a deep respect for agency and thus true sympathy for everything with Mari. So why can't there be true sympathy without respect for agency? Because agency is the active life force for all beings. So you cannot pretend to do this part way. You have to have full respect for agency because Agency is the active life force for beings, recognized beings. If you sympathize with a river but treat it as a dead resource, you are not in real sympathy with it. You are projecting human sentiments onto something you refuse to acknowledge as alive with agency, as having real personhood in the meaningful sense, in the meaningful moral sense. Environmentalism, without respect for agency of the land, is little more than hollow pity at best, or self-interest at worst. Similarly, pitying a human without acknowledging their mari is a denial of their being as relation. Thus, true sympathy means recognizing and honoring the active relational agency of all beings. True sympathy requires respecting agency because agency is the very relational life force that constitutes being. To sympathize without acknowledging agency is to deny the kinship network of living relations, reducing the other, human or more than human, to a passive object rather than a co-creator in the shared web of existence. And I didn't quite get this last time that I was reading on Friday. My brain thought that there was something there when I read over it, but I didn't make the connection, so I didn't stop to really think about it. But this is kind of related to the idea that you were talking about at the beginning of the stream, right, Kimatara, where you were talking about the metaphysical relationship between Christians and atheists and the way that they turn the non-material into material, right? Something that's more than human, right? That something that is greater or above, that somehow gets reduced to the same kind of thing that's just a thing in the material world. Another referent, like that desk, or right, yeah, exactly, right. It's also, I think, good. Thank you for the confirmation. It's also worth noting that there's another element here. I think that we were talking about this on Friday. I want to make sure that that part of the difficulty with properly understanding dialectics is at no time, at no point in our investigation is there a subject which we can grasp and know and define. That all things, all subjects of our inquiry or subjects of our attention are always in ongoing processes, right? We are engaging in a process with it, with our attention on it. But we are not the only ones who have attention on it. Let's go back to what I was talking about, the idea of democracy. Part of the struggle in trying to figure out how it is that we should organize ourselves politically in a nation is the fact that most people don't actually understand the words or the terms or the ideas that the rest of us use to talk about the concepts of state and government and rights. And when we make these things the object of our attention, we are engaging in a process with something which is not static, right? We are engaging in a process by which we are changing what it is. And the whole time, we are not in sole control of the changes that are being made to that thing. Right? It's a matter of negotiation, and that negotiation is in a lot of senses, for some of the things that we talk about, global. Right? It depends on some kind of global truth. Do states have the right to exist? Strictly speaking, no. Right? If we rationally understand what a state is in the context of a moral world of moral agents, states have no right to exist. However, in the current state of affairs in material reality, states have more rights than everybody. Anybody. The weakest, most illegitimate of states still has more rights and more material protections for its survival than you do. Despite the fact that states, rationally, aren't entitled to existence. They have no right to exist. You do. You literally have the right to exist anywhere, everywhere. Humans aren't illegal wherever they are, morally speaking. That idea is completely incoherent. Wherever you are, you have the right to be there. Morally speaking. Necessarily, always. Without qualification. Wherever you are, you have the right to be there. As a being who is existing in time and space. Qua being existing in time and space. Not morally complicated. It's only politically and legally complicated. Yeah, a lot of people conflate state and government, and it doesn't help when people like me use those terms interchangeably, which I do an awful lot. But it's because we never get to the nuance. There is some nuance to be had there, but we never get to that part of the conversation. We're still always busy laying the breadcrumbs to get people to that part of the conversation where they can understand that distinction. Right, good. Good. To a passive object, right. So let me, because I didn't finish reading the sentence. I went on a tangent in the middle of the sentence, as per usual with me. To sympathize without acknowledging agency is to deny the kinship network of living relations, reducing the other, human or more than human, to a passive object rather than a co-creator in the shared web of existence. Without this, you reduce them to bare life, to a what, erasing their who. This is why pity without respect feels dehumanizing, as it collapses the person into an object of concern rather than a fellow being. Maori, then, is the attunement to another's being as a self-possessing, world-disclosing agent. Good. Gets us kind of caught up. I think that's probably the last thing that I finished reading before the connection got wonky last week. I'm going to take a minute and go tell the dog to be quiet, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to finish reading the article. So I'll be right back. Yeah, that dog's a little bit young yet, so he hasn't realized that when it's nothing, he can just go back to ignoring the nothing. It was nothing. He didn't hear anything. He just thought he heard something. And anyway, at some point, dogs do figure out that it's nothing and I can stop barking on it. He's just not there yet. Good. So, picking right back up where we were. Objectification of another, and indeed of land, lends to the objectification of the self. And this is where you're going to describe that dialectical relationship. Consider a household in the 1800s. There was only one person, the man, in this household who was allowed agency to vote, to spend, to bear arms. This relation creates the objectification of the woman of the household, as she has not been afforded the agency of the man. And no confusion here, right? This is all normal. This is patriarchy, right? That the man is given the privileges, and it turns the woman into subservient. It's more complicated than that, though. This relation is dialectical. Those who were denied agency begin to perceive the empowered individual not as a fellow subject, but as an instrument, an extension of the power they themselves are refused. Especially in times of necessity, the person with agency becomes a mere appendage of the material need. So the man is afforded the privilege, but that privilege turns into more than responsibility. It comes with this added responsibility, but there's a lot more burden that comes with it as well. Not just the responsibility. Not a being who acts, the agent becomes objectified as a means to access what the disempowered are denied: money, protection, and voice. Here lies the self-perpetuating nature of patriarchy. Men of the era often complained of feeling unappreciated as breadwinners, without recognizing that it was their own monopolization of agency that transformed them into mere appendages of bread. Right? And I really like that phrasing too. And not to say that the phrasing of the rest of the article isn't superb, but this in particular is just. In fact, I've got the proper emote for this. Right? It's just perfect. To treat others as objects is to invite one's own reduction into an object. It creates an object-object relation, or a dependent instrument relation, instead of a person-person relation. In this way, both sides become trapped in objectified roles. And this is also always the case. It's, I think, important to point out that in all processes of subjectification and objectification, it's always reciprocal, right? When we make other things the object of our attention, right, we become subject to that thing. For us to understand it, it has to have some power over us. This is part of the dialectic that many people kind of don't get or kind of miss out on, right? For me to look at the thing and to get something meaningful from the thing, it has to have power over me. I have to give it power over me so that it informs me of what it is. But again, like I was talking about with the concept of democracy, or the concept of God, or the concept of nothing, whatever it is, those concepts are not only ours. We depend on these concepts for our individual perception of the world, But these concepts are not only our own. We share them with everybody else. This is, again, the whole reason why Descartes is completely mistaken for the assertions that he made. Right? Cogito ergo sum. Right? That's true. Because I can think, it proves that there is a thinking thinker doing the thinking. Right? My doubt that I am a doubting being proves by my performing that doubting that I necessarily do exist. This is correct. But Descartes' assertion that he has gotten rid of all the other things, has eliminated all of the things about which he can be mistaken, has doubted everything which can be doubted, hasn't even begun to be true. Right? He's painted himself into the corner, as I described in Friday's stream. But there's a whole world behind him that he is neglecting to recognize, which informs him and his ability to make the claim cogito ergo sum. Right? For Immanuel Kant, no, excuse me, for Rene Descartes to make this assertion required a pre-existing world of people and ideas and books with philosophy in them, right? All of these things come before Rene Descartes. And Rene Descartes supposes that he can come up with these ideas of pure reason all on his own, without understanding that every time he thinks about anything, he is engaging with substance which has meaning, which transcends him himself. So here he is believing he has doubted all that he can doubt and gotten rid of all of these extraneous things, without realizing that every time he puts his attention on something else, he takes his whole universe with him. His whole history, all of the people that have ever been associated with him, all of their understandings of philosophy, all of these things are part and parcel. That they come with. Every time he reaches out to the world to understand something in the world, his reaching out is reaching out with all of his previous experiences and the whole world which existed with him, behind him, as he's reaching out. And we do the same. We don't have individual experiences of the world. We understand the world from an individualist perspective, but we understand it through mechanisms that are shared. For us to articulate and to share our experiences with others means that we have to use a language that other people recognize and understand, which means that we have to deal with concepts and ideas that are not entirely our own, right? This, well, I don't want to go off on that tangent. That's not a productive tangent. And we've already had enough tangent. Let's get back to the article. We'll bring Immanuel Kant into this into this later. But for now, we'll just leave it at Rene Descartes and move on. To deny agency to others is ultimately to become an object one's self, and not a being who acts, but a functionary of others' unmet needs. This extends to land and its materials too. Under capitalism, the earth is reduced to lifeless matter, while its ghost exchange value, oh, that's right, we did read this before. I forgot about this part. Well, while its ghost exchange value is propped up and incessantly pursued, while its body, the real ecosystem, is exploited. This has consequences for workers, just as the household agency dialectic, there is a land dialectic. If the land is reduced to an object, then those with more agency, such as workers, would be seen as objects, as instruments to extract from the land, just as the household agency holder becomes an appendage of the object. The worker becomes a mere appendage to the object of the means of production. So there was a conversation that happened. Matt, are you still here, I hope? There was a conversation that happened in my chat between Matt and Trashnomancer, where they were talking about whether or not to consider farmers as capitalists. And I don't remember how the conversation ended. I didn't follow the whole thing. But there was a lot of interesting components that were taking part in the conversation. And one of the things that I think becomes apparent when we evaluate that kind of question through this kind of lens is that the farmer does become a function of capitalism. Whether or not we consider the farmer, the individual themselves, to be a capitalist, I would recognize the function of farmer, the role itself, not necessarily the individual. The role itself is, and the role of farmer would take on this character of appendage for capitalism, for the system, for the perpetuation of the rest of us. And this brings me to the realization, and it wouldn't surprise me if this comes up later in the article, that our capitalist overlords have created this kind of dialectic relationship where because our capitalist overlords needed us to be dependent on them for water, right? Because we can't just get access to water generally. There are some exceptions to this, but for a lot of people, they depend on states or governments or some other body for their water and for their food and for their protection and for their care. And because the capitalist overlords have created a situation in which we can't get our own water, they have become an appendage for our water. Right? They have turned themselves into subjects for our objectification. Or objects. I get that flip thought. Objects for our subjectification. That we use instrumentally. That they facilitate this this need rather than being autonomous, authentic agents of their own, co-creators in a shared reality. They become mere appendages of the system. Farmer, the role is an extension of capital. Yes, is what I think. I don't remember what Matt or Trashnomancer were arguing. It was a while ago that the conversation was happening. But I can pull up. Let me pull up this thing in Discord because Matt left notes about it in the Discord after they had their conversation, so that would help me fill in the gaps. Remember, nice. In the Discord, Matt had said, I think I processed the conversation in chat today and distilled it down to why I think a farmer isn't a capitalist. So Matt was arguing that farmers themselves are not capitalist. Trashnomancer was arguing that they were. They essentially acted as a 1099 contractor because 1099 contractors are supposed to provide their own equipment and time while creating a deliverable. The sentence ends there. A deliverable product, I think, is what Matt was going to say there. They're also expected to hire staff as needed. It's basically a cost control mechanism of business, using labor to buffer and cut expenses. They need to work within the parameters and resources they are given to accomplish that goal, but they are ultimately not decision makers in most of the process. This is a very unique situation. Other small businesses may or may not be capitalists. I genuinely believe, as somebody that's well educated in how businesses operate, that not all small businesses are capitalist. They are capital managers. I think people underestimate how much Bank of America and other institutions like them, in collaboration with the government, limit small businesses' ability to make decisions about their own businesses. Ultimately, every small business works within the pressures of capitalist competition. It's a fine line, though. And that's a summation of, or distillation of Matt's ideas after, at the end of the conversation, the back and forth that they had with Trashnomancer. So yeah. Yeah, read in the Discord notes. And I see this relationship entirely different. I see the farmer in this situation as no less a complicit capitalist as anybody else. That they don't have much decision-making power, I don't think matters. And that Bank of America controls their decision-making power also doesn't, for me, matter. Doesn't make a difference in the reality of what those people are. Well, I was about to make a statement, and then as I was thinking about that statement, I realized that it categorically commits me to realities I don't want to be true. So I'm just trying to decide if they're actually true, and I'm trying to pretend that they're not, or I'm trying to actually work this out. Right. They have an incontrovertible relationship with capital assets. So for me, the farmer is a capitalist insofar as they own the capital. So if the farmer owns the land on which they farm, that farmer is a capitalist. Necessarily and unavoidably. If the farmer is farming on somebody else's land, that farmer is like every other laborer who is not a capitalist. That's for me the only meaningful difference. And I remember the context that now that this came up. We were watching that video from Madeline, Maddie Pendleton, talking about the problems of anarchism, right? The reason why Maddie doesn't call herself an anarchist anymore, is because anarchism has these problems, and these problems ultimately undermine leftist movements in general. And what she was talking about was the capitalist, no, the anarchist she was arguing online with was arguing that it was wrong for the state to require of farmers that they would use their farmland to feed people rather than using their farmland to make a profit. And Maddie was trying to say, right, that this is a mechanism by which we can meet people's material conditions and bring us closer to material conditions for a revolution, whereas the anarchist was arguing against the use of state power for anything, right? Arguing against the use of state power for the sake of arguing against using state power for any end, right? And the anarchist began making the argument from the position of, well, it's not just for the state to require of individuals what they do with their property, right? And this is a clear indication that Maddie's not talking to a real anarchist, because no real anarchist believes that anybody has a right to property, that nobody else has a right to access to. That's not how anarchism works. You have a right to personal property, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that personal property is something that you get to have exclusively either, right? Right. If we're gonna make the distinction, I'm sorry, my eye is itching for some reason, between private property and personal property, right? Private property is something that communists and anarchists alike don't think that people need to have, right? That you can deny access to that land, or that you can deny access to that lake or to these resources. But in an anarchist society, even personal property is still something that you have only by virtue of the relationships with and between the other co-organizers in the group in which you are, right? You don't get anything as an individual, right? Individuals don't get things. And it's not because nobody cares about you having stuff. You can have your toothbrush, you can have your shoes. Nobody wants those things. But you, the anarchist who is living in this anarchist society, shouldn't look at those things as though they are yours exclusively. You should understand those things as as being the product of society wanting you to have the things that you need to survive so that you can be a productive member of the society. Those things are not yours so that you can have them all to yourself. Those things are afforded you by the culture and society in which you live because you're a human worthy of dignity and you should have things, right? Like, it's just this. Sometimes my mouth just breaks. Most MLs have such a bad faith analysis of anarchists. My disposability is counter-revolutionary. Article argues that's why the purge. That's why they purge, and that purging leads to stagnation of the dialectic, leading to decay of the communist movement. Right? We talked about that 2 streams ago, I think, Kimatara. We got kind of deep into that. I think state can exist, but it should be to administrate services that are difficult to do as individual or co-op. Yeah, was talking to an ANCAP. Yeah, absolutely, Jane. You nailed it. It was an ANCAP that she was talking to, which again, it seems like it's completely incoherent philosophy to me, but communism equals Wii phone instead of iPhone. I didn't catch that. That's hilarious. Yes, most people in general have a bad faith analysis of opposing ideologies. Yes, and that's yeah. It's really sad. It's not sad. Let's be more serious about this. It's not just sad. It is a habit that is conditioned into us. This came to my attention. I mean, it's something that I've been aware of, but it came to my attention explicitly very recently in my class, in my discussion board posts for my class last week. Last week, there was a lot of conversation. It was the propaganda one. I think I told you guys about it. The discussion board is the claim. Would utilitarianism agree with the claim? And the claim is it's morally permissible to use propaganda to achieve social cohesion, right? Right, and they have to choose whether or not utilitarianism would or would not agree, and then they decide whether they agree with that analysis and if that's a kind of society that they would like to live in. But over and over and over and over again, for this class, other classes haven't been so narrow. But over and over and over again in this class, students are pointing fingers to Soviet Russia and their use of propaganda, and pointing fingers to Nazi Germany and their use of propaganda, and pointing fingers to North Korea and their use of propaganda, right? Pointing their fingers at all of these other... And it was a great opportunity for me to address the class yesterday when we met for class, where I brought to their attention the habit and tendency that they were all displaying of pointing the finger at all of the other nations and all of the other people in all of the other times who were guilty of this thing, instead of using this as an opportunity to reflect on one's own culture and society, which was literally the point of the assignment, right? Rather than those people being reflective about the propaganded society in which they live, in which they need to learn how to navigate and how to determine truths, instead of coming to face to face with the reality of their propagandized society, they chose to point the fingers, right? But it was a good opportunity for me to bring this tendency to their attention and to help them understand the ways in which they have been conditioned by their culture and society to see other cultures and society as the problem. Always, necessarily, categorically. If we're talking about something that's a problem, this is how we do it. Never like this. So it's not simply a sad state of affairs that most people in general have a bad faith analysis of opposing ideologies. People in general, or in most modern cultures and societies, have been conditioned by those cultures and societies to be critical, but only critical in one kind of way. And we all develop a habit of being critical in only one kind of way as a product of being in our culture and society that has conditioned us to see the world this way, that problems are there, right? And later we can have war and go deal with our problems, right? That's the lib mentality. This is the society in which we live. All of your problems you think about this way, and then we're going to have a war later. Don't worry. Don't worry about your problems. We're going to have a war about this later. Or we are going to pass laws which are going to target these trans people. Or we are going to pass laws which target these homosexual people. That's how it works. Right? I'm a fluid socialist. I feel that I adapt to my analysis better when I don't tether myself to one particular. I guess I'm a left ultra trot MLM and COML. Yeah, me too. I'm all over the place. And well, I don't know. I've explained this before, and I'll take a minute to explain it again. I like the idea of having set as my default analysis rooting out oppression. And that's how I understand anarchism, is not a political philosophy, but a process by which we identify and root out unjust oppression. And I really like having that as my default lens. When I think about having communism as a default lens, what I think about is a lens by which I understand subjects by virtue of their material conditions, or that which they require to live, their basic material needs. And I don't think that this is bad, but when I apply a communist lens, I feel like I am less focused on the subject themselves and more focused on the necessities, that which is that which transcends that subject immediately. The stuff just around the subject. How do I phrase this? I feel almost like I'm looking past the individual to see instead their needs and to see the material conditions which prevent them from being free. When I look at a subject through an anarchist lens, I'm looking at the subject to identify their relationships, to see which of those might be oppressive. I guess, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess I could just retool my lens, or lenses. I mean, I guess I could just try to be different, or try to think about this differently rather than just being lazy about it. I don't know. I'll see you later, Matt. I didn't. You probably said that a while ago, but it's great to see you, Matt. I hope you have a great day. Yeah, probably like 12 minutes ago. I'm not an ist is the last thing that Matt said. I read theory and have values, just trying to move the needle left in my lifetime and maintain principle. Right. Well, and that's yeah, absolutely. That's really great way to think about it. It's a good attitude to have, I think. Marxist-Leninists are just militant social democrats, in my opinion, and that's been my experience too. I have, or there was a point several years ago where I was making strides and efforts to better understand Marxist-Leninists. And it's because I love Leninism. I love Lenin. Lenin's philosophy is fantastic. but that group does have a tendency to just be militant social democrats. But I wonder too about the well, there are some other obstacles too. Now that I'm thinking about it, right? I made a joke earlier, Jane, when you were talking about the distinction between state and government. I kind of made a joke about that we never get to have we never get to that part of the conversation because we spend so much time trying to lay the breadcrumbs trying to get there. And I think that that's probably a good example of the kind of miscommunication which prevents cross-group understanding. Because I've talked to a lot of communists who their objections to anarchism have to do with the lack of distinctions that are often made between state and government, which is in anarchism, but anarchists never get around to explaining, right? We talk about prefiguration, and we talk about ways to organize, and we talk about ways that we can establish the material conditions for a revolution. And when people are like, okay, well, what about the details? Anarchists go, well, we can't make suppositions about those people who are going to be in that time and place and the kinds of things that they ought to do. We can't make sweeping statements. Yes, we can. Yes, we can, but we don't. We can make sweeping statements about what people should not do, right? That is valuable. That is powerful. We can have that part of the conversation. And then we rarely really ever get there. So I think that might be part of the problem too, is, well, and this has to do with the larger problem that Nisa and I were talking about months ago, where in leftist spaces, it's hard to disagree sometimes. It's hard to have room to freely express oneself without fear of censorship or without fear of being attacked by your own leftist friends, right? By those who are in the tent with you, for having dissenting ideas, or for having different viewpoints, or for pushing back on the prevailing attitudes. So I think until leftist spaces can better learn how to disagree with each other without walking away in disagreement, then that's where we're going to be, is that we can't get real nuanced critiques of each other's philosophies. The issue is too many follow the orthodoxy, not the dialectic. Yes, absolutely. I think that you said almost the exact same thing in last chat too, in last stream, which was perfect. They abandoned the science for an almost religious fervor. Yes. And that's, I think that might be part of the problem, like what Jane was talking about with the Marxist-Leninists too. Is that there's an orthodoxy that seems to prevail there. And that orthodoxy doesn't, from my understanding and my reading, that orthodoxy doesn't exist in the literature. It's an attitude which was read and interpreted out and informed by people's feelings and by people's hopes and aspirations, their ideologies, rather than the material conditions, rather than the dialectic, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. That was a long aside. Let's get back to the article. Because we're close to finishing. So before some rain shows up and ruins my internet access, let's get through this article. So we don't have to carry this over to yet another stream, which should still be fine, but right, so this is where we were, is this section, right? Under capitalism, the earth is reduced to a lifeless matter, while its ghost, the exchange value, is propped up and incessantly pursued, while its body, the real ecosystem, is exploited. This has consequences for workers, just as the household agency dialectic. This has consequences for workers, just as the household agency dialectic. There is a land dialectic. If the land is reduced to an object, then those with more agency, such as workers, would be seen as objects, as instruments to extract from the land, just as the household agency holder becomes an appendage to the object, the worker becomes a mere appendage to the object of the means of production. And again, I would add on to the top of that even our capitalist overlords fall subject to the same dialectic, right? By them appointing themselves all the privilege and power, they have made themselves subject to the system that they now have to maintain. It requires of them. They give up their freedoms. They gave up their freedoms when they chose to privilege themselves so. Though they didn't really choose, most of them, they were born into that position. But if at any point any of them made the decision with full recognition, though I imagine most of them don't have the capability for full recognition. That's a whole other conversation that I would like to have at some other point, is literally the epistemic ability for millionaires and billionaires to understand that they are bad for the world. Right, that's a whole ass other conversation, which I think has some value to it, but since no millionaires and billionaires are in my chat or are going to watch my VODs, maybe we'll shelve that for some other time. But thus, workers' liberation cannot simply be seen or fought for as a class issue, but also as a relational issue. The earth, Papa Tuanuku, has, as a political actor deserving of its own agency, is not outside the means of production, like factories, but is, in fact, the very means of production. She is working alongside you the synthesis of the dialectical relation between worker and production. That is really I missed this the first time I read it too, that she is working alongside you, right? Here you are the laborer who is toiling with nature, right? And we get this image, or for me, what immediately pops into my head is a very John Locke kind of idea of property. Man, that's going to be a whole ass aside. Maybe I'm going to shelve that and talk about that later. I'm going to talk trash about John Locke in a little bit later. In reference to this, the not just that nature becomes impersoned, but that we can see the evidence of nature's or the earth's personhood by virtue of us working alongside the earth to create that which we are able to create. You can't make pie. Let's go with cake. You can't just make cake. You don't have what is required to make cake. You can seek out the things that you would need to put together in organization in the right way to make a cake. You have that capability, but only because nature is there to give to you the things that you need to make the cake. You can't make cake. You can't do anything. You literally can't do anything for yourself without nature's help. Yeah, syncretic. And I don't think I've seen that word before. I'm going to look up the word syncretic. Huh. Combination. Yes. I think that this does fit. It's a perfectly awkward fit, if that makes sense. It's an awkward fit, but the way in which it's awkward isn't just appropriate, it perfectly encapsulates, actually. Because it would, right, yes. So instead of me going on and just, yes. Yes, good. I like that word. I'm going to have to, think I would like to adopt that word. I might spend some time on that word a little bit later. Huh. Thanks, Curse Chaos. Thanks, Jane. I appreciate that. Good word. I love learning new words. Good. Did I read this part? Yes. She is working alongside you, the synthesis of the dialectical relation between worker and production. After all, a factory or tool doesn't cease to be nature. The wood handle or hammer doesn't cease to be material from the tree. Well, and let's not forget that you need to be in a time and place. Let's not forget that to do work, you have to be in a time and place, which nature has conveniently provided for you, right? Right. But the image, the step-by-step imagery, the tool, right? The tool doesn't, the hammer handle doesn't cease to be nature. It doesn't cease to be nature because we've turned it into an artifact. And that's artifact is a really useful philosophical word, in that what an artifact is recreation of natural materials, right? To into something which is a new identity. That identity is still comprised of those basic materials. It's an Aristotelian idea that has to do with the four causes. Yeah, a human cannot divorce themselves from nature at all. Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's in divorce, that's one of my favorite ways to use the word divorce. Too, right, good. Yes, absolutely. That's going to be another tangent, though. I was about to go on another tangent, and I think I'm going to shelve that tangent, too. I don't know that I'll remember to come back to that one. I will come back and talk trash about John Locke. I love talking trash about John Locke, and I won't forget. But let's get to the end of the article, and then I'll come back and talk trash about John Locke. Right. Papatuanuku is formed into tools and factories, and just like a worker under capitalism is made to work under exploitative conditions that we don't get to control, that she doesn't get to control. She then becomes proletariat just like you. Yes! She has class consciousness! She is class consciousness! A better way to understand the worker is a better way to understand the worker's relation to the means of production then is as stewardship rather than as control. Think of it like those old union posters, but instead of just two workers shaking hands, a worker shakes hands with the branch of Reikau. Yeah, Reikau. If, to phrase Kropotkin, everything we enjoy in life is a product of collected labor and therefore belongs to all, then we must also recognize that everything we enjoy is drawn from the earth and thus belongs to the earth as well. Right. And that's like the point that I was trying to make about that distinction between private property and personal property. Really, an anarchist doesn't even believe in the private or in the personal property either, but sees the things that the individual has in their possession as the result of that individual's contribution with and to the people, to the society, to the world. Everything that we enjoy is the product of collective labor. Everything that we enjoy is the product of somebody's labor with nature. And those things don't go away. Whatever it is that we have in our possession, we might want this to be my private possession, but it is still the product. It is still informed by a world that is othered. So even if it's my labor, right? If I make a hammer, I go out and cut down the wood, and I smith the metal, and I do all of the forging, all myself to build that hammer, right? Did I build the anvil? Did I build the saw that I used to cut the tree down? Did I build all of the tools that I used to make the hammer? Did I feed myself all of the time when I was the only one doing the thing? Because if somebody else helped to feed me, if somebody else has made my clothes, if somebody else has brought me water, if somebody else has contributed to my well-being, their contributions to me get poured into my labor in the creation of the hammer that I'm making. Everybody else's contributions to the world that I get to enjoy get poured into the hammer that I am making. It's not just my hammer. I have the freedom and opportunity to make the hammer because I live in a world so constituted. And that constituted world is a product of lots of other people's work and energy and labor and wills, and their interactions with their material environment. Right. Yes, climate change is nature rioting. Changed my mind. If nothing else, I think it's nature trying to get our attention. Nature trying to communicate, right? Nature trying to send us a signal, right? I think that that's true. Whether or not we want to assign some kind of consciousness in the way that we think about our own consciousnesses to the planet, it seems clear to me that the planet is giving us signals, right? It's trying to let us know about something. Usufruct. the right to enjoy the use and advantage of others' property, short of the destruction or waste of its substance. Right, yes. That is a word that I long forgot. Good. Good. That is a perfect word to encapsulate the kind of idea. Right. And again, if I have something that is my private property, it is, or my personal, I keep getting those back, my personal property, it is only because I live in a society such that others have afforded me the freedom and opportunity to have the thing. Right? I have the thing because of the culture and society and everybody else's contributions pour into that, unavoidably. Right, good. Or perhaps we should take his statement in Conquest of Bread with a post-human ontological perspective. The cities, bound together by railroads and waterways, are organisms which have lived through centuries. Dig beneath them and you'll find, one above another, the foundations of streets, of houses, of theaters, of public buildings. Search into their histories and you will see how the civilization of the town, its industry, its special characteristics have slowly grown and ripened through the cooperation of generations of its inhabitants before it could become what it is today. Right. Good. Right. Good way to bring it back to post-humanism. Because I forgot that that's literally one of the main parts of this essay is that we're contrasting where we are with a kind of post-humanism, an understanding of self, which is almost unrecognizably distinct from how we understand ourselves now. I think I said that right. If the language used is to be taken literally here, it is very fitting that Kropotkin would have such an analysis that is so contemporary with the concepts of Wakapapa and Maori, with the interconnectedness and labor of everything, not simply human, but also more than human, as Kropotkin was in part inspired by Maori. Am I giving too much emphasis on Maori? Because I think that it's not Maori, right? It's Maori. Am I putting too much emphasis on? And I'm not rolling the R either. The Maori. Am I putting too much emphasis on the A? Maori. Kropotkin was in part inspired by Maori through his close friend Elise Reclus, who wrote about us at length in The Earth and Its Inhabitants, Oceanica, excuse me. In fact, Reclus would suggest the title and preface the very first publication of the Conquest of Bread. Huh. No way. I'll have to look more into this author. That sounds fantastic. We must realize that control of the means of production, in effect, creates a relation of servitude to the worker or capitalist, enabling the very same capitalist relations we seek to abolish. Huh. So, seizing the means of production. Seizing the means of production cannot be taking control of the means of production without making this mistake dialectically. It's almost like moldy, but with a rolled R instead of L and D. Mori. Huh. Okay. Mori. Because that sounds like moldy. Mori. Okay. Okay. I think I can commit the it's hard for me to see the A with a line over it and not want to make the wrong sound, but thank you. Like breaking the means of production out of prison instead of controlling it ourselves. Yes! Yes! It's like breaking the means of production out of prison instead of controlling it ourselves. Right, yes. Right. Good. Good. Right. That's what you go on to say. Thinking of workers as controlling rather than stewarding the means of production still keeps us in a capitalist ontology of domination, whether it's capitalist or the worker in control. If the world is seen simply as a machine, then it leads the worker to be seen as simply a cog. Thus, to assist in true liberation, we need to understand the who-ness in not only each other, but in every material thing in nature we interact with. So, and I think that this is a really big takeaway too. And I almost feel like there needs to be more emphasis on this. That the engagement that we have with our world now is dehumanizing for us. But not only does our thinking of the natural world as inanimate, not only does that not serve the external world in which we live, not only does that not serve Earth and nature, it dehumanizes us. And by recognizing the humanity of that which is beyond us, by recognizing the personhood, by recognizing the moral salience, the reality of the negotiation process, right? By the recognition of the negotiation process by which truth is arrived as a combination of dialectic synthesis, improves our own understanding of our own humanness in a way that gives us greater dignity, in a way that, oh, wow. It allows us to recognize what we are in a way that actually gives us meaningful rights, that actually gives us the kind of moral content we as moral beings are supposed to have in a pluralist existence where we treat each other with dignity and respect, right? That is entirely devoid of the world in which we live. Actually, in a very severe, very real way. Yeah. Yes. Nature is as animate as us humans. and it wants to escape prison. It wants to escape prison in the same way that humans want to be free. Naturally, there are very few natural inclinations that we can look to that are actually consistent among humans through time and history. What I mean is we can separate out things like that humans seek sustenance, right? This is required naturally. Right, we have to eat or we perish. We have to drink, we have to find some kind of shelter. Well, no, I guess we can go back. We can make this even more clear, because our inclination towards being free isn't any less natural or basic than those inclinations toward feeding ourselves and seeking out water and seeking out shelter. Our seeking out of freedom is as directly tied to us and our being. This is where it would be helpful to draw attention again to the conversation that we were having about democracy, and it's not being a static thing. It's the combination of a negotiation of a bunch of different people's ideas about what democracy is or ought to be, right? This has happened to freedom. Malatesta talks about this in a few different ways, and I think that Malatesta is... Grab my brush. In many ways, Malatesta, I believe, is only brushing the surface of this idea. Of the distortion of the idea of freedom and what freedom is and what it means. Because if you ask Americans what freedom is, many Americans will begin to tell you about the opportunity to do whatever kind of work you want to do, the opportunity to have any kind of profession, the opportunity to have your own business, the opportunity to engage in whatever kind of to buy the kinds of things that you want to buy and to have a selection of different kinds of things, right? That they don't want the cookie cutter. They want to go to the grocery store and have a whole bunch of options at the grocery store. That doesn't have anything to do with freedom. None of those things are freedom. None of those things are even in the fucking ballpark of what freedom is. And most Americans don't have any idea that they don't have freedom, right? They've been told their entire lives that they are free in their bondage, right? And just think about this, right? People who are in who live in boxes, who isolate themselves on purpose in these boxes and live in ways that are completely constrained by economic constraints and by social constraints and by punishments that will literally kill you. And they're told that this is freedom until they believe it. And then you have to try to convince those people that the freedom that they've been clinging to is actually their bondage. And they will fight you to the death for trying to take the bonds off of them, for trying to release them from their tethers. They will fight you tooth and nail to the death if necessary, because you've tried to remove their fetters because they recognize those limitations as freedom. We should be able to draw our own boxes. Right, absolutely. And in every meaningful way. Right, when we talk about gender liberation, I think that this is a good way to really express the idea of just how little real freedom humans generally have in most cultures and societies. What we're talking about when we talk about gender liberation is that people are basically asking permission to do certain things or to wear certain things or to dress certain ways. When we're talking about gender liberation, we are talking about trying to carve out something that isn't freedom. Just to be clear, we're talking about carving out something within so oppressive a system that any ability to move around at all in that overwhelmingly oppressive system as seen as freedom, right? Think about like candle to the sun. Think about that difference from a candle to the sun. Gender liberation isn't even a candle. Gender liberation is this, right? In comparison to what real actual freedom is, the sun. And we just don't have anything anywhere near. And we don't have material conditions anywhere near something that resembles real freedom. We don't have real rights. We don't have real freedom. And most of us don't understand the severity of that problem. Most of us, and by that I mean leftists who are familiar with this language and know these concepts and can keep up with this conversation, most of us don't understand how severe this problem is. Because there is not sufficient language to articulate the ideas. And all of the language that we are using has been so manipulated and perverted that the ideas won't come across. They won't compute. We cannot dismantle the master's house because we are using this language. We shouldn't get rid of the ability to draw the boxes. Yes, and that's the other thing, the other aspect of gender liberation as opposed to gender abolition. Boundaries and categories and archetypes are helpful. Extremely. That's how we understand the world. Our categories of apprehension are those things. And have to work that way necessarily. This has to do with my really terrible explanation on Taoism. When we recognize differences, right? That's us establishing boxes for us to use later as ideas and constructs that help us make sense about the world. And then we readjust and reevaluate those boxes all of the time. The important thing to remember is that those boxes are not dogmatic. And that's society, culture in general is caught in this idea where we see those boxes as actual truth. So when people are trying to move the edges or the borders of these boxes, or they're trying to adjust what these categories mean, people lose their mind. That's my category. I need that to make sense about the world. I need to know who to oppress. Right? And people get really upset with bending the gender binary. And people get upset because they want to know who to oppress and how to oppress and where the social hierarchies are. Those categories for them tell them who to abuse and how to treat others in the world. Right? And this is this is Jordan Peterson. I was trying to remember who was the piece of shit that was talking about this. Jordan Peterson had gone on this large tirade at some point where he was talking about, well, it's important for me to know what people are so I know how to refer to them and how to talk to them and how to talk about them. Right? He was talking about the necessity of being able to identify who is female so he knows who he can get away with objectifying openly in culture and society. Right? That is literally what Jordan Peterson was saying. That's the claim. That's the point that he was making, actually. And I'm barely even being putting words in his mouth. I'm barely even twisting his words, because what he said, it was that especially in workplace environments, it's important for people to know how to address others and how to treat them appropriately based on their gender roles, which means that you treat people differently based on their gender roles, which is necessarily sexist, you piece of shit. It's necessarily. If you need to know who someone's gender is so that you know how to treat them, you're a sexist piece of shit. Necessarily. You could just treat people with dignity, and it doesn't matter what's in their pants, or how they dress, or how they identify, or who they fuck with. You can just treat them with dignity and respect, and then you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about the hierarchies. You could just treat people with dignity and respect. How about that, Jordan Peterson? Our schemas are determined subconscious as well. It's determined subconsciously. Yes. And that's an attention thing. I think that we've talked about this a little bit before, where we have a tendency to think about attention as a spotlight, right? When our attention is on something, we have a tendency to think of this as a spotlight that we shine on a particular object or subject of our attention, whatever it is. And actually, attention is kind of the opposite. Our attention spends all of its time identifying all of the things that we are constantly being bombarded with, it's choosing what to filter out of our immediate consciousness. So our attention is constantly busy trying to ignore the ticking clock and the color of this thing and the noise over there and that tree over there that has the leaves that are waving that don't have anything to do with what I'm doing, right? My consciousness, my conscious attention is busily trying to push out of my field of view all of those other things and keep those things suppressed so that I can focus on only a few things at a time. so that I don't become overwhelmed with all of the things that I am able to perceive. Because I am able to perceive nearly infinitely, but my attention is, the things that I can focus actually on at a time. So attention it's an automatic process that we don't exactly. It's a subconscious and automatic process that is constantly happening to us, within our own brain. And one of the other things that's difficult to keep in mind about this is that we don't exist in one time and place per se. Right? The way that we experience time has some flexibility. It has some elasticity to it. So in this moment, right, or this moment or the next moment, in each of your waking moments, your consciousness is several moments in the future and also several moments in the past, to make sure to clean up, to make sure you haven't missed anything. But in this, our focus moves back and forth between what we're planning tomorrow and processing what we did yesterday, processing what I need to do in an hour from now, processing what happened to me an hour ago, right? We're constantly in this state where we're oscillating back and forth between these that are around in our own present. And while we're moving around back and forth in our own present, our attention is busily trying to keep us to be able to focus on one or a few things at a time. Right? So it's constantly going through a lot of processes that we are almost entirely unaware of. We can become aware of some of these things through mindfulness techniques, or through self-reflection, through some shadow work. There are strategies that you can employ to peel away at that. But I imagine that that what your attention does is something that will always elude your ability to understand. Right? It will always be so much more busy and will be doing things several steps ahead of you. Right? In anticipation, in ways that you're not even consciously aware of. Right? And it's a really hard thing to, this could go into a discussion about free will real quick. Yes, actually it could. Right? And this, right. Because we have the ability to have some control about this process. I'm trying to decide if I want to go into the flat tire analogy, or I think that's just going to regurgitate the same ideas without elucidating any further nuance. Right. And I still haven't had the time to actually look that thing up, because there was that section from Hannah Arendt, from one of Hannah Arendt's works, that I was going to read for Apolitical Daddy, and then Apolitical Daddy didn't show up for a few streams, and then I forgot about what excerpt that was that I was going to have them read. But he's here. Dog just keeps losing its mind because the wind's blowing. I'm pretty sure it's from this one. I'm pretty sure it's right here. So let me take a moment. Actually, let me just start reading this. And I'll probably come across the thing that I was meaning to. Oh, here it is. I have it marked. Not surprisingly. I don't know why I had so much trouble finding it the other day when I was trying to find it. Right here, marked. I'm looking at it. Looking right at it. Okay, so this is from The Human Condition from Hannah Arendt. And this is in the chapter titled Action, which is chapter 5. So right in the middle of the book, too, actually. And for those of you who are not aware, philosophers often do this on purpose. The middle of the book is where the most important philosophies are, on purpose. For those of you who did not know that that was a thing in philosophy, the middle of your philosophy book is where most of your philosophers are going to put the things that they care the most about in that work. And this comes from Plato, I want to say, was the first one to really start it as a trend. And then Aristotle carried it on, and it's become a tradition that philosophers do. Anyways, let me go back to this. So this is from The Human Condition. It's actually almost the start of the chapter. Right. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna read this whole thing. I'm gonna go back and read this. It's gonna be a little bit long, but just bear with me, everyone. So with word and deed, we insert ourselves into the human world, and this insertion is like a second birth, in which we confirm and take upon ourselves the naked fact of our original physical appearance. This insertion is not forced upon us by necessity, like labor, and it is not prompted by utility, like work. It may be stimulated by the presence of others whose company we might wish to join, but it is never conditioned by them. Its impulse springs from the beginning, which came into the world when we were born, and to which we respond by beginning something new on our own initiative. To act, in its most general sense, means to take an initiative, to begin, as the Greek word archein, to begin to lead, and to eventually to rule indicates. To set something into motion, which is the original meaning of the Latin agere, because they are initium, newcomers, and beginners by virtue of birth. Men take initiative, are prompted into action. Like there was something. Because they are initiatum, newcomers and beginners, by virtue of birth, men take initiative, are prompted into action. We'll skip that part. This beginning is not the same as the beginning of the world. It is not the beginning of something, but of somebody who is a beginner himself. Right? And so there's while I was reading the article from Kimatara, a lot of elements from The Human Condition kept popping into my head. Right? And this is the recognition of a somebody. So let me, before I continue real fast, I've mentioned this before, that Hannah Arendt breaks up the human condition into 3 categories, 2 of which she has just mentioned in this quote so far. Labor is what humans do to perpetuate their own survival. So feeding yourself and housing yourself, but also how people go about feeding and housing themselves as groups of people or as communities, right? Both of these are the aspect of labor. We've also got work. This is what we do to make permanent something of our mortal selves. So the institutions that we leave behind and the world that we build through our contribution to those institutions. One that I like to use as an example is libraries. At some point, somebody took it upon themselves to gather a bunch of books together and then to make those books available to the public. And other people thought that that was a good idea, such that they continued that institution by doing those kinds of things with their time and their energy, by collecting books and making them available to other people. Right? This is an institution which persists because of the work of individuals. Labor's what we need to survive. Work is building that which persists beyond the mortal existence of humans. And then vita activa. Vita activa is living life, but it is also the process by which we establish political bodies. Take a second and let that sink in. Vita activa is the process by which we establish political bodies. When we move through the world in ways sometimes tied to labor and or sometimes tied to work, but any time that we move through the world with or around others, we do so in a way that reifies those others' humanness. But with our actions and our activities, we establish what others' political bodies are and what political bodies mean for those who have this property. This is where we get rights. This is where we get morality. This is where we get all of the human constructs that we use to navigate the world, is vita activa. So now that I've set that up, I'm going to continue reading the rest of the quote. Right, okay, so it is not the beginning of something, but of somebody, who is a beginner himself. With the creation of man, the principle of beginning came into the world itself, which of course is only another way of saying that the principle of freedom was created when man was created, but not before. So, everyone's following along, hopefully. It is in the nature of beginning that something new is started, which cannot be expected from whatever may have happened before. So, I said this to my class yesterday. That's I was about to get confused. In behavioral economics, one of the very first things that you learn in behavioral economics is that people are predictable. Individuals are not. You can build models, and then based on how you've constructed your models, you can select samples of people, and in those samples of people, you will get consistent trends. You will get patterns. You will get clear indicators of how people respond to certain kinds of stimulus or certain kinds of environments, certain kinds of incentives. People are predictable. Statistically, people are predictable. Individuals are not. Individuals are unpredictable and don't follow trends and don't follow statistical models, don't adhere to those models. That's the difference. We can make models and we can understand patterns of behaviors. We can't predict what an individual will do. This character of startling unexpectedness is inherent in all beginnings and in all origins. Thus, the origin of life from inorganic matter is an infinite improbability of inorganic processes, as is the coming into being of the earth viewed from the standpoint of processes in the universe, or the evolution of human out of animal life. Right, oh man, I just lost the place. There's a lot of correlations too, right? We're talking about Hannah Arendt is talking about humans, the individuals, as an analogy within an analogy of human people, within an analogy of the world, within the analogy of the universe itself. So she's doing this kind of circle within a circle within a circle framework to get us to understand the transcendent truth here. There we go. Here we go. The new always happens against overwhelming odds of statistical laws and their probability, which for all practical everyday purposes accounts for certainty. This is the quote that I was going to give to Apolitical Daddy. Right? Which for all practical everyday purposes amounts to certainty. The new, therefore, always appears in the guise of a miracle. The fact that man is capable of action means that the unexpected can be expected from him, and that he is able to perform what is infinitely improbable. And this, again, is possible only because each man is unique, so that with each birth something uniquely new comes into the world. With respect to this somebody who is unique, it can be truly said that nobody was there before. Right? So, and that's a concept kind of even more powerful than nothing. Right? With respect to this somebody who is unique, it can be truly said that nobody was there before. If action as beginning corresponds to the fact of birth, if it is the actualization of the human condition of natality, then speech corresponds to the fact of distinctness and is the actualization of the human condition of plurality, that is, of living as a distinct and unique being among equals. Analogiception. Yes. In an analogy. I love that, actually. It took me a second to get it, but yeah. Good. But yeah, no, and this is I think the evidence that there is some kind of free will, some kind of opportunity for us to do something new and different. When I was talking about this before, it's got to be over a month ago now, I think that what I had said was, I know that free will is a real thing which exists because here you are. Right? Because here you are, something which is brand new. You are something which has never, ever, ever existed. in the history of history, in all of existence, in the whole history of the whole ass universe, before even humans, you have never existed. Here you are, something completely brand new. That is free will. Here you are. You just have to recognize that, first off, you are a conditioned being. This is a tough thing for some people to come to terms with. Is that for you to have any modicum of free will at all, the first thing you have to do is accept that you are a determined being. You're not entirely determined. And this is a distinction between authenticity and bad faith, which I'm not sure if we've talked about. We'll talk about it. Because I love talking about Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre, who actually originated these concepts, but I usually use the lens of Simone de Beauvoir because I like her better. Yeah, we should free will. we should free will. Clever play on words. I like that. What was I talking about? Shit. Oh, right. Simone de Beauvoir. Right. So, oh no, I have mentioned this before, right? If you are a forgetful person, that's not a good way to start this, right? I use forgetfulness because it's a way that I am. I try to be real. I'm honest. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with the conditioning. It doesn't have anything to do with the determining. Right. So, a good way to think about this is to understand. Well, okay, we can actually go back to the way that we were talking about freedom, right? That most people in America don't understand what freedom is, or what don't understand what this word is. This disconnect is a determining. It's a determining influence, which for most Americans determines very strictly how they understand freedom. Their environment, their culture and society, their moral communities, their situation materially informs their ideas of what freedom are. For someone to be able to deviate, they would have to recognize their conception of freedom as alien, as something which they didn't give themselves. For that person to be able to break away from their conditioning, they need to be able to separate their ideas from their identity first, right? Which means that you have to recognize those ideas as being external to you first. And that those ideas came to be your ideas through conditioning, through determining conditioning. Now that you understand your relationship to your environment and the way that you understand the world has been determined by that outside world, now you can do something about it. Now you can recognize this relationship which you depend on. You can't divorce yourself from this relationship. This is how you navigate culture and society. Right? You need this. But you understand this now as something apart from you, which means that you can negotiate with it about how you are determined by it. And that's the only way. That is the only way that you get free will, is by recognizing the ways in which you are necessarily determined. And then looking at those relationships to see what you can do about those relationships. How much you can wiggle or nudge or push back on those ideas. And culture and society will let you a little bit here and there. You can, when we're talking about those boxes that other people use to understand the world, boxes like gender, right? Some of us are in the process of adjusting those boxes, of pushing those boundaries, of changing the nature of those categories. And that is us recognizing that we have been determined by our culture and society, and that we are not entirely happy with that way of being determined. We would like to be something else, right? We would like to be other than the way that we've been determined, and recognize that there is an opportunity for us to be different. And so this is where we get the Simone de Beauvoir idea of authenticity and bad faith. So we need to recognize what we are first. Because if we pretend that we are not what we are, then we can't change what we are. We'll be blind to the reality of what we actually are, such that any changes will be making changes that don't make sense with what we are, because we're lying to ourselves about what we are. Jean-Paul Sartre's example that he gives in No Exit, the most explicit, the main character, none of them are really main, but the main character is a coward. Somebody who served in the military and when was presented with moral danger, ran away from the conflict, right? And is plagued by their own cowardice. But at no point in the play does that individual come to terms with their own cowardice. Everybody else knows. Everybody else comes to find out how much of a coward this person is. But this person never admits it. They never actually face the reality of their cowardice. Therefore, they become imprisoned by it. Unable to leave that condition of cowardiceness, because they are lying to themselves about what they are and who they are in the first place. They don't want to be a coward, so they pretend that they're not. They lie to themselves and pretend that they're not, rather than accepting the truth. This is living in bad faith. If you have characteristics that are true of you, but you don't like those characteristics and you pretend that those characteristics are not true of you, you are living in bad faith. And you are powerless to do anything about living in a way that you don't want to live, as long as you are living in bad faith. You have to recognize what you are first, and recognize that you could be different. Right? That you are not determined. You are not entirely, or to put this another way, the book that is you has not been entirely written yet. The book that is you has not been written. You can change your narrative. You can change what and who you are to some extent. Right? You cannot change the fact that you are mortal. You cannot change the fact that you need sustenance, and that you need to consume calories. Right? That's necessarily true of you. You are determined by those factors necessarily, and there's nothing that you can do about that. There are ways in which you are determined, and there are some things that you can do about that. right? What your parents' expectations are of you do determine what you do. They do, so long as you care about your parents' expectations. And it doesn't matter whether your parents are alive or dead. From the grave, their expectations can literally limit the things that you believe are possible for yourself, for better or worse. We are not automatons, maybe. And this is a good opportunity for me to throw out Soren Kierkegaard. I don't generally talk about Soren Kierkegaard very much because he is a Christian existentialist, and I'd prefer my existentialism without the God things. But Kierkegaard is also a really good author, a really good philosopher. It has lots of really good, insightful ideas. What's the quote? Let me get the Kierkegaard quote. Actually, instead of paraphrasing, it's good enough. Parts. They called? What are they called? What are they called? Carriage. Come on. AI is not doing a good job of helping me try to figure out what this quote is. The driver and the doctor. No, that's not it. Hold on, let me grab my Philosophy 101 book. Let me just do this. Fuck's sake. Because the quote's in here. It's thank you all for your patience while I'm trying to figure out this thing that I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, I was not going to find this by thumbing around. Um, well, that's in the wrong chapter. That Let's go to the next. It's been a while since I've taught Philosophy 101. This is it. This is it. Ah ha ha. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that this is, yeah, okay. So it's kind of a long quote, but it's worth it. Yeah. It is impossible to exist without passion, Soren Kierkegaard says, unless existing means just any sort of so-called existence. For this reason, every Greek thinker was essentially a passionate thinker. I have often wondered how one might bring a man to passion. So I have thought I might seat him on a horse and frighten the horse into a wild gallop. Or still better, in order to bring out the passion properly, I might take a man who wants to go somewhere as quickly as possible, and so was already in sort of a passion, and seat him on a horse that he can barely walk. But this is just how existence is, if one becomes conscious of it. Or if someone hitched a carriage with Pegasus and an old nag and told the driver, who was not usually inclined to passion, "Now drive," I think that would succeed. And this is just how existence is, if one becomes conscious of it. Eternity is the winged horse, infinitely quick, and time is the old nag, and the existing individual is the driver. That is to say, he is the driver when his existence is not merely so-called existence. For then he is no driver, but a drunken peasant who sleeps in the wagon and lets the horses fend for themselves. So, yes, we are not automatons, so long as we recognize that we are supposed to be driving the carriage. But most people exist as though there is no driver driving the carriage, but a drunken passenger who sleeps in the wagon and lets the horses fend for themselves. Right? So this analogy, I think, does a pretty good job of illustrating. And I used to, what is it? It's, I'd have to look up my notes. What's the... Let me pull up my Philosophy 101 notes in a long time. It's been so long since I've taught Philosophy 101. Documents, archive. This the... No. Not here. It's in the okay, so there's, I don't remember. Oh, subsistence. I think that's the word. Right, okay. Right. So, I used to contrast ontological existence with ontological subsistence. And the words, so far as the definitions go, are not really accurate, but it does give the right impression about the difference, because a rock subsists, and that rock doesn't have to do anything to subsist, as it is there, as it is thus. There it is, subsisting. But the rock doesn't exist in the same way that we exist when we engage with the world in a way that recognizes our own humanity, or our own activeness in the world, right? That is what ontological existence is, which requires some kind of reciprocal recognition. It requires that this thing does something. We are existors, right? In that we actualize our own wills to create a world for us, is us existing as existors, right? Rather than merely subsisting, rather than merely being automatons that, not automatons. I think another good way to think about this would be to think about molecules in a cell, right? That molecules in a cell perform certain kinds of tasks, and they do different things. But there's nothing in the cell that directs itself or tells itself what to do. Everything within the cell is waiting for the other things in the cell to signal to it is time to do, to activate, to actuate, to do whatever the function is of that thing that is in the cell. Right? It's there is an activeness, there is a reactiveness that non-self-directed humans still present, right? People who don't live still get up and get dressed, put on makeup, go to work, go to the grocery store, go to the movies. They do things that make them look like the rest of us who are actually living life, who are actually self-directing, who are actually trying to change the directory of their life in significant and meaningful ways, to improve themselves, or to change society, or to fight for justice, or to give a shit about anything. The vast majority of people don't. But that doesn't mean that they don't do stuff. They do. They create the biopower of the oppressive system that keeps us all oppressed. That's what the system needs to survive, is a bunch of actors who believe that they are free, who believe that they make their own decisions because they can select from a few different shirts in the morning, and that they can select from a few different kinds of coffee on their way to work, and that they can choose which kind of work to do. But they believe that they're free. And they're going about the establishment of recreating the world as it is, without any thought, without any consciousness, without any moral reflection, without caring about themselves as a self-directed, independent identity which can forge out its own future and path to the extent that such a thing is possible, right? Cogs in the machine, yes. And the automaton analogy isn't bad. It's a really great analogy, but I think it has limitations that get us to think about the process in a limited way. Cogs in a machine does a better job, I think, because the machine requires, there is a greater structure, and that greater structure requires the cogs. And when we think about automatons in the way that Rene Descartes talked about them, or the way that they are generally discussed in philosophy, we're talking about something that resembles a human, right? But its mechanisms are purely mechanical. It doesn't make decisions about how to operate. It operates as it's been designed. And so with the automaton analogy, we have we have an unaccounted for creator, right? That doesn't fit neatly into the analogy in a way that we would like, without having to invent some kind of god. But it also doesn't involve that person's participation in the perpetuation of the machine, of the recreation of society, of everything else. What? Why was that? I don't understand why it took that out. Decepticons, there we go. That could work too, because there is no creator of the Decepticons. Not like a god. No, I think that absolutely works too. Dude, I did not realize it was already getting so late. But I started late, so that's why it's going so late. I think it's a good idea for me to start wrapping up stream. But before I do, I do a terrible job of remembering to ask for money. And I know that I don't have a lot of viewers and in the chat right now, but maybe if there's somebody lurking, somebody hanging out that might want to contribute to the channel, or if any of you can afford to help out financially. We're like, it's the 17th. It's the 17th, and I still have 0 subs for the month. So and that's okay. I don't do this for the money. Obviously. But yeah, I guess I'm done asking for money. I hate asking for money. Anyways, this has been a good conversation. We nailed everything that was on the or I think that we did a good job of talking about everything that was on the title. We wrapped up the article, and the whole thing that we've been talking about all day today has been metaphysics of an expanded plurality, right? We're trying to understand a self in context of the immediate situation that they're in, the immediate relationships that are directly around them, but then understanding this relationship as analogous to our greater connectedness to the world around us. And an expanded plurality where we can humanize the natural world around us. And in so doing, it turns out, we can expand the reality of our own agency, of our own freedom, in a way that is better than, because I was going to say that expands our personhood, but the concept that we're talking about is wholly better, superior than the concept of personhood. Because personhood is a privilege that we invented for ourselves so that we could have the privilege of giving ourselves protections and considerations that we don't want anything else to have. That's what personhood is. It is a moral evaluation where we say we are not just distinct from our natural world, we are different from it, and we are better, we are hierarchically better than it. So in so doing, we have privileged ourselves in the same way that the breadwinner, that the patriarch of the home that privileges themselves into being the sole breadwinner traps them in a cyclical relationship where they become an appendage of other needs for the situation. That's what personhood is. It's us privileging ourselves in a way that actually dehumanizes and objectifies what we are and who we are. So the expanded plurality that we're talking about isn't just taking the idea of personhood and allowing this category to include more. It's eradicating this category, this arbitrary distinction entirely. By obliterating this distinction, we take on our actuality, our freedom, and our agency in a completely new and superior way. As well as I can understand it anyway. Become the mere appendage of bread. Right. Right. Exactly. Good. What a great conversation we've had. Hidematara and Jane, you have been just fantastic. As usual, you guys are always a hoot. And a wellsprings of great philosophical content. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you, DJ Che, again for hanging out and for the raid. I really appreciate it. It's always good to see you. Nova Rider, it was great to see you. Thank you for stopping by. And Matt also stopped by. They're over with the Noisy Immigrant right now, probably. But we appreciate them too. So let's... Oh, I changed the thing. Let's see if we can find a raid partner. That we can raid into. Let's see. Still having problems with that. So we'll try again. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, good. Black Liberation Media is a pretty cool channel. They do an array of different kinds of things, so it would be really hard for me to give you a clear idea of all of what they do. because there are a number of different people that are involved in how they organize their content and how they present their content. So it's a surprise, oftentimes, but they're comrades, and I always have a good time whenever I hang out there. So let's go and give them some love. Oh, Kimatara says there's a game called I Am Bread, and I imagine that. LOL, but ironically, bread is a subject too. If it is treated as an object, then you have the issue of the dialectic again. Right, because it continues on. Right. There's so much fun to be had there, actually. But anyways, thank you so much, everyone. Again, I really appreciate it. I'll see you all on Friday, I guess. And until the next time I see you, be excellent to each other.